I've been watching Australia make tech mistake after tech mistake after tech mistake for as long as I can remember, and making excuses for every little thing they do, and never taking responsibility for the fact that what they're doing is a horrible idea. And over the past couple of years, it's been especially bad. But this might be my favorite thing so far. Who is ready for some Patriot Act level surveillance? Because I know that I sure am. So this bill is the Surveillance Legislation Amendment Identify and Disrupt Bill of 2021. Now, you'll get most of what you want to know about this from just going and reading the articles. But I wanted to go and do the right thing and go and actually have a read of what this bill actually entails. And you know what I can tell you? The bill itself is incredibly boring to read. Who would have thought that reading legal documentation was very, very boring? Now, the warrants inside are not boring, but everything surrounding the warrants will put you to sleep. Now, some outlets have been mistakenly calling this the 2020 bill. While that is not entirely inaccurate, it has been referred to that in previous iterations. It is now the 2021 bill. It was first introduced back in December of 2020 though, but that was just a reading, and then it just sat around for a couple of months until August 24th, where within 24 hours, it was passed by both houses. Now, from what I understand, there are two situations where a bill will be passed this quickly. The first one is when it is so uncontroversial that no one really cares about it. So, for example, with the Health Insurance Amendment Compliance Administration Bill of 2020, this was about recovering amounts overpaid for incorrectly claimed Medicare benefits. Like, no one really cares about that. It was passed in 2 days. Okay. The other situation, though, is when it is so controversial that you don't want anyone to know about it until it's already been passed. Now, you might be able to guess from the title which one this might actually be. Now, this bill introduces 3 new warrants for the AFP, the Australian Federal Police, and the ACIC, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission. That is the Data Disruption Warrant, the Network Activity Warrant, and the Account Takeover Warrant. And some outlets have been saying that these powers are granted without a warrant. That, I do want to say, is completely incorrect. This bill is entirely about creating these new warrants. What this does offer, though, is that none of the warrants need to be issued by a judge. Obviously, a judge can issue them, but it will not be required. So, in the case of the account takeover warrant, that can be issued by a magistrate. A magistrate is like a judge, but they're like a lower tier on the judge scale, I guess is a good way to put it. And the other two can be issued by a nominated Administrative Appeals Tribunal member. The concern with not needing a judge to sign off on these warrants is it makes it much, much easier for the AFP and the ACIC to actually get their hands on these warrants, meaning that while they will obviously be used for dealing with criminal activity, they may in the future be used for, something less criminal, maybe dealing with some sort of government dissent or some other thing that the government doesn't like to hear. But maybe the warrants themselves don't actually provide any useful powers, so let's see what they actually do. Now, I will save you needing to read this entire section because it is quite long and does have a lot of legally jargon in it, and I'll try to paraphrase it in the best way possible. So, for the data disruption warrant, in short, what it does is gives the police the ability to disrupt data by modifying, copying, adding, or deleting it. Now, disrupting data has a very specific definition. Disrupting data held in a computer means adding, copying, deleting, or altering data held in the computer. Now, the reason why that distinction is special is because it handles data that is currently in transit in a slightly different way. If the data is currently stored in a computer, let's say you have a file on your system, this would give the police the ability to do basically anything they want to that file. They can read, modify, or even delete that file. But if something is currently in transit, they do not have the ability to modify that, obstruct it, or delete it. They can, however, look at that data in transit. This does imply that they would need some form of backdoor into any of these systems operating inside of Australia. One interesting distinction with this data disruption warrant is that the warrant must not be executed in a manner that caused the person to suffer a permanent loss of money, digital currency, so things like cryptocurrency, or property, so they couldn't do something like, I don't know, fry your GPU, other than data. This would imply to me that if you had, say, stolen Bitcoin on your system, through this specific warrant, they would not be able to delete your keys to access that wallet. The problem with that, though, and why this is probably going to be misused in the future, is the warrant specifically enables concealment of access. So the warrant authorizes the doing of any of the following: anything reasonably necessary to conceal the fact that anything has been done under the warrant or under this subsection. Now, the next warrant we have is the network activity warrant, which allows the police to collect intelligence from devices or networks that are used or likely to be used by those subject to the warrant. Now, that might sound identical to the data disruption warrant, and for the most part, it actually is. I've read this probably 4 times, and I can only find one distinction between the two of them, and that is that the data disruption warrant operates at the level of individual computers, whereas the network activity warrant operates at the level of criminal organizations. But from what I can tell, the powers it provides and the limitations on those powers seem to be almost identical to what it says in the data disruption warrant. I am not a lawyer. I very well may have missed something. It might be some like weird legal speak that gives them some extra power that I don't know about, but from what I can tell, they're basically the same, which would explain why they can both be issued by a nominated AAT member. If they're going to be basically the same powers, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be. They all should be issued by a judge, but if they're going to be issued by someone else, the ones with similar powers probably should be issued by the same group of people. Now for the last one, which is probably the most fun. This is the account takeover warrant, and if you thought the first two were bad, you don't know anything yet. So what this allows is very simple. It allows the police to take control of an online account, for example, your social media like your Twitter, your Facebook, so on and so forth, for the purpose of gathering information for an investigation. Now, remember how the other warrants had these little things called restrictions on like what the police could do? Well, who needs restrictions? So, if necessary for the purpose of taking control of the target account as mentioned in paragraph A, adding, copying, deleting, or altering account credentials to which the target account relates, so they can just change your password and stuff if they want to, adding, copying, deleting, or altering data in a computer, what the data disruption warrant allows them to do, and if having regard to other methods, if any, of taking control of the target account which are likely to be as effective, it is reasonable in all the circumstances to do so using a communication in transit for the purpose of taking control of the target account, as mentioned in paragraph A, basically distributing account takeover malware, if necessary to achieve that purpose, adding, copying, deleting, or altering data in the communication in transit. Basically saying we need backdoors in Australian social media. Now, for Australians, compliance is not optional. If you're an Australian company, an Australian sysadmin, or an individual who has control over some data, you must actively help in situations where the warrant relates to data you have control over or potentially face a 10-year prison sentence. I don't know what the punishment would be for Australian companies, but I imagine it would be a fairly hefty fine. Now, you might be thinking, but aren't all the big social media platforms in, the US? Well, they'll bend the knee for a bit of a paycheck. Or they will just pull out of Australia completely and, tell them to F off. But I expect the paycheck to be more likely, especially considering things that happened recently with the whole Australian news situation. Now, surely I'm exaggerating about this whole backdoor thing, and Australia wouldn't be trying to just destroy encryption. Well, no, they are, because this is actually an extension to an older bill called the Telecommunications and Other Legislation Amendment, Assistance and Access Bill of 2018. So, Australia is well known for not liking encryption, is a good way to put it. Now, the justification for this bill is what you'd basically expect from a bill like this. The Australian government is going to find the worst possible criminal activity they can think of and use that as a reason why this bill is important. So, misinformation, no, that's not enough. Extremism, no. Dissent, nah, definitely not. How about we go with terrorism and CSAM? And both these things are horrible and should be stopped, but that doesn't mean destroying any level of privacy that exists with Australian citizens. And maybe the current government is only going to use it on these very, very serious crimes. The problem with bills like this, though, is the current government is not always going to be the government. At some point in the future, there is going to be a government that cares way, way less about freedom that is going to use this in a very negative way. Now, you might argue the current government doesn't care about freedom, but that's a whole nother video. Now, I personally have no way to stop this, so instead, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to grab a drink, and I'm going to relax and watch the world burn. And hopefully drink enough so the pain goes away. But it probably won't, so hopefully the drinks will at least dull it. That's going to be it for me. Links down below if you want to go and read about this yourself. And if you like this video and you want to support the channel and become one of these amazing people over here, please go check out my Patreon, Subscribe Start, and Libera Pay, linked in the description down below. I've got a podcast called Takeover available basically anywhere. I've got a gaming channel called Brodie Robertson Plays where I live stream twice a week, upload about 5 or so YouTube shorts, and this channel is also available over on Odyssey. That's going to be it for me, and I'm out.